Hi, welcome back. I'm Adam, and I'm with my co-host today, Mark Becker.
Hey, Adam, how's it going?
All right, doing well, doing well. So right now, I just wanted to welcome you to newest episode of Harlem Stories.
All right.
All right. So, first thing I want to discuss, before we get into, a little bit more specifics is that, going forward, our new episodes and, we're going to you'll probably hear this repeatedly in the next few episodes. We're moving into a bi-weekly format, and, that's just so that we can give you quality material. Want to make sure to give you some really great stories, but obviously that all takes time. This is all on top of our roles as real estate agents. So yeah, every minute of every day gets occupied.
It's just like food manufacturing. You can have quality or quantity, but you can't have both.
Right. And we try and give you at least a little bit on the quantity side, but yeah, I'd prefer to give more of the quality. So we're recording this, it's end of August, but probably won't be releasing this until late November, beginning December. But appropriate because we're going to be talking about Christmas time, and that's obviously we're still sweating here from the hot weather, but those cooler days are coming soon.
I think I heard an interview with Celine Dion once where she talked about how she recorded Christmas music in the sweltering summer heat. So hopefully we'll have as much success as she did.
I would love to have that kind of success. Yeah, absolutely. Great role model. So today what we're going to talk about is how Upper Manhattan influenced the modern image of Santa Claus.
Oh, wow.
So, I think there's, the average person might not necessarily know how Santa Claus came about. Or I know I've spoken to some people over the years, and, they were under the impression that Coca-Cola, through their campaigns, actually influenced the modern day image of Santa Claus. And to some degree, that's not actually incorrect. It's just that the modern image of Santa Claus even goes back further, and we can thank our connections in Harlem and Hamilton Heights to that.
Wow.
So this is a long involved story in terms of going back to that, and we always have like so many different aspects over here. I live in Hamilton Heights. It was named after founding father Alexander Hamilton. His name, his home, actually remains in the neighborhood. It's been moved a couple times. Most recently, as 2008, moved around the corner. I sell homes in the neighborhood, Harlem, Hamilton Heights, and other neighborhoods in northern Manhattan.
How do they do that? They physically forklift a home and move it?
Yeah, there's actually this great video out there, that you can find from 2008. What they did is, because it was kind of jammed in there between an apartment building and a church that wasn't exactly like squared off or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus there was a statue of Alexander Hamilton. They kind of had to lift it above the church rotunda area. It was like 20 feet up in the air. Had to have like airbags and the rollers, and it was a slow process. And then they literally rolled it down the block, around the corner, and down the block.
The insurance salesman on that deal must have made a fortune.
Yeah, well, I think they were only going something like 6 miles an hour or something like that. So it wasn't exactly
a lot of pressure.
Quick. So going back to this, there's so much history that is rich on these neighborhoods. Today we're talking about the connections to Santa Claus, and one of the things that people might not recognize is a gentleman by the name of Clement Clark Moore. Now, those that know Chelsea might be familiar with that. In fact, I know one of the Algren agents that we had on staff over here. He was in a building, the Clement Moore, in Chelsea. That's because the Moore family actually owned the vast majority of the property that was based in Chelsea.
Now, is this the same Moore family? I just incidentally heard about a Moore family upstate in, I want to say somewhere around Tuxedo. They were originally from Ireland. Is that right? Or is this a different family?
I do not know. So, this is a perfect time to kind of give that disclosure. we are, at Harlem Stories, we're big fans of history, but we're not necessarily historians. So it's okay to say, I don't know. But I think, most importantly is, that, just acknowledging his role over here. Currently, Clement Clark Moore is interred permanently in the Trinity Cemetery in Hamilton Heights. This is the same as Trinity Cemetery and Extension that you find on Wall Street, down by Wall Street, across the street from
It's around 150th and Broadway, 151 maybe.
Just slightly further north, actually 153, between 153 and 155. And there's a lot of history, behind that particular cemetery.
Sure.
Now, Clement Clark Moore is, one of those people that is not a household name, but I bet you probably know who he is, aside from the Chelsea connection. You want to know why I bet that?
You know what? You got me on this one.
I got you. Good. So you probably know the poem "A Visit from St. Nicholas."
Oh, wow.
So not everyone knows it by its proper title, but as soon as I start reciting the beginning of the poem, everyone seems to know that then "'Twas the night before Christmas, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." That was the poem that was created, as a result of, Clement Clark Moore. And, he, now has, as a result of this, he actually now has a reading at the Church of the Intercession, which is at 155th and Broadway. A lot of actually filming done at this church. There's also a crypt underneath where they actually host some parties, including Saturday Night Live. I know there's been some concert after parties there as well. Some kind of cool place. But what the Church of the Intercession winds up doing is the week of prior to Christmas over there and Christmas Eve, they actually do a formal reading of the poem. "'Twas a visit from St. Nicholas." So now we go back to a little bit more in terms of the original idea of St. Nicholas and how that came about into Santa Claus. So originally it was believed to, going back in time, that St. Nicholas was believed to have performed multiple miracles. And he was also known for his generous practice of gift giving, giving rise to the traditional concept of Santa Claus and Sinterklaas. So it was the patron saint of children. So that's kind of how some of this ultimately evolved. And not too long ago, a few months ago, it was announced by archaeologists of the discovery of the burial place of St. Nicholas. And that was over within the St. Nicholas Church. It's over the site where St. Nicholas had actually served as bishop in and I might be mispronouncing this, the Antalya province of Turkey. His remains were removed and ultimately removed more than once.
Well, I think you pronounced Turkey just fine.
Awesome. So we're gonna go, fast forward back in time, to a little bit more modern, period over here. So, that poem obviously discusses, the beginnings of what we know as modern Santa Claus. There was back in the 1860s, there was a gentleman known by the name of Thomas Nast. And some people might know him by his caricatures and editorial cartoons from the 1860s. He became a staff illustrator for Harper's Weekly in 1862. And his cartoons, and anybody that knows old New York history, his cartoons actually played a significant role in bringing down the corrupt administration of Boss Tweed, a Tammany Hall leader. So, that's one of the interesting connections to him. And his drawings are iconic in American history as he redefined the look of Santa Claus. Previously, Santa Claus was a thin man wearing green robes, and it was later suggested in his works that Santa Claus lived at the North Pole and his toy workshop was located there. And Thomas Nast was also known, because He had other major, cartoon contributions, such as, illustrating for the Republican Party elephant, the Democratic Party donkey, and giving Uncle Sam his now famous beard, and so many more cartoons, before that. Nast ultimately wound up creating this look from Clement Clark Moore's poem. And obviously, we're now starting to make the connections, because within that poem, it gives a verbal description of what, St. Nicholas, looked like. And from that, Thomas Nast took his inspiration. Now, that's part one of the connections. Part two of the connections is, where was Nast creating these, this material from? Well, interestingly enough, he had a studio and he rented a townhouse. There was a back house on East 125th Street, ironically. So, this is, a good portion of where these things came out of. He was working out of a brownstone. And, while he created his new look for Santa in 1863, ultimately that's when he had his, brownstone. Later, most people think the modern day version of Santa Claus revolves around the 1931 Coca-Cola commission by illustrator Haddon Sundblom to paint Santa as the warm, happy character that's still the model for modern day Santa Claus today. But he hadn't actually suggested, he said, that it was the works of Thomas Nast that influenced his version of modern day Santa.
Wow, it's amazing how much influence this guy Nast had. He must have been a very popular person in his day.
Yeah, his political cartoons, so much was created today. Even if you look at more tabloid papers of today, the New York Post, it was a lighter read than something like the New York Times, and it was similar with that with the political cartoons back in the day. So that kind of gives you that. But, finally, when you travel out throughout Harlem and Washington Heights and Hamilton Heights, you'll see the influence of wherever you wind up going. So there's St. Nicholas Avenue, St. Nicholas Place, St. Nicholas Terrace. There's, St. Nicholas Park. So all of this goes back to, tying back to, how St. Nicholas and Harlem and Upper Manhattan are intertwined. So it's terrific that Thomas Nast had his studio here, in Harlem, and then you had Clement Clark Moore, who was Nast's inspiration, is interred in Trinity Cemetery in Hamilton Heights. So, these are all the kinds of, interesting connections and stories that we'd like to bring to you at Harlem Stories. And, thank you for your time and attention. And, we're on to the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay tuned. Thank you.